entscheidend. Mitten im Frieden überfällt uns der Feind. Darum auf zu den Waffen. Jedes Schwanken, jedes Zögern wäre Verrat am Vaterlande.
Imagine standing in a fortress where every artillery hit plunges you into complete darkness. You're surrounded by your own waste, sharing your food with rats, while the screams of dying men echo through stone corridors for days. And yet, this was still better than what awaited outside. This is the Battle of Verdun, the longest battle in World War I, lasting 303 days with over 700,000 casualties. And it all started with one German general staring at a map, desperately searching for a way to win a war that was slowly strangling his empire to death. Late 1915. German Army Chief of Staff Erich von Falkenhayn has a problem. The British naval blockade is strangling Germany. Every day, his people grow hungrier. Every day, the empire grows weaker. And every single day, this stalemate on the Western Front drags on. Germany inches closer to defeat. Because here's the brutal truth Falkenhayn understood. Germany cannot win a war of attrition. So he does what any desperate commander would do. He studies the map, searching for weakness, searching for opportunity, searching for one decisive blow that could end this nightmare before his nation collapses from within. And he finds it. The British sector, specifically Artois in the north, hit them there, break through, and the entire Western Front collapses like dominoes. It's perfect. Except it's not. Because Falkenhayn had already tried attacking the British, and he learned something terrifying. As long as the French army can send reinforcements, any breakthrough is impossible. The defense is simply too strong. So Falkenhayn realizes he needs to do something twisted. Before he can destroy the British in the north, he needs to trap the French in the south. Not just attack them, not just defeat them. He needs to find a place where France would send every available soldier, a place they'd sacrifice everything to defend, a place where he could systematically, methodically bleed them dry until they had nothing left. Now, Verdun wasn't actually Falkenhayn's first choice. It was heavily fortified, one of the strongest defensive positions in France, but it had something far more valuable than strategic importance. It had symbolic importance. Verdun was a symbol of French national pride, a fortress city that had stood for over 1,000 years, and Falkenhayn understood something crucial about war. Sometimes symbols matter more than strategy. Here's the genius and the horror of his plan. The first step is to capture the heights east of the Meuse River. Step 2 is load those heights with artillery and turn them into a death zone. The final step is force the French to continuously attack those positions to take back their sacred city. And every time they attack, German artillery would tear them apart. But wait, you might be asking, why would France keep attacking? Why not just retreat? Here's the thing. French Army Chief of Staff Joseph Joffre keenly knew Verdun wasn't that important militarily. His plan, if the Germans broke through the East Bank, just retreat to the West Bank and build new positions. Simple, logical, sound military strategy. But then, French Prime Minister Aristide Briand made something perfectly clear. Losing Verdun was not acceptable. Not because of strategy, not because of tactics, but because the psychological impact would be catastrophic. If Verdun fell, the French public would lose faith in their government. Briand would lose his job, and if Briand fell, so would Joffre. So giving up Verdun meant giving up their careers, their legacy, their place in history. Falkenhayn had predicted this exactly. He had created the perfect trap. France would fight for Verdun not because they had to, but because they couldn't afford not to. And if his plan worked, if France bled itself white at Verdun, while the British panicked and launched a desperate, poorly planned offensive at the Somme, Falkenhayn calculated there would be peace before the summer of 1916. Germany would win the war. All winter long, Germany prepared. Artillery pieces of every caliber were dragged through snow and mud. Millions upon millions of shells were stockpiled. Attack battalions trained for the assault. The plan was simple: total destruction. They waited for the weather to clear. February dragged on. Snow, rain, fog. And then, February 21st, the weather finally broke. German aircraft and observation balloons rose into the clear sky. At 7:12 a.m., the order was given. The largest concentration of guns in human history to that point opened fire simultaneously. Witnesses called it the Symphony of the Devil. Over 300 kilometers away near the Swiss border, people could hear the thunder of German guns. Entire forests were obliterated, trees blown meters into the air. Stones and earth rained down on French positions. Some soldiers were simply erased, torn apart by the sheer force. Others were buried alive, trapped deep in their bunkers as the earth collapsed on top of them, suffocating in darkness while the ground above them continued to explode. Then came the German stormtroops, grenades, wire cutters, flamethrowers. Through ice and snow they advanced, capturing trench after trench, despite fierce French resistance. The first days were a German success. They advanced, they gained ground, they pushed forward toward the mighty fortress of Douaumont, the key to the heights, the key to Verdun, the key to victory. But something was wrong despite their advances. They weren't advancing nearly as fast as Falkenhayn had calculated. The French brought in reserves. They brought in Philippe Pétain to organize the defense. And the most important heights were still under French control. Then came Fort Douaumont. Fort Douaumont was supposed to be impregnable. Unlike the Belgian fortresses that crumbled under German artillery at the beginning of the war, Douaumont was built with special reinforced concrete that just would not break. It sat like an island in an ocean of fire and shrapnel. In early March, small German platoons crept toward the fortress, expecting a brutal fight. Instead, they found it almost completely empty. The strongest fortress in Europe was captured by a German officer with a pistol and a lot of guts. Germany celebrated. Newspapers proclaimed victory. Surely this was the breakthrough. But here's what they didn't know. Fort Douaumont wasn't a prize. It was a tomb. Every artillery hit knocked out the lights. Men cowered in absolute darkness for days. They lived in their own waste, shared their food with rats and lice. The stench of the dead mixed with the screams of the wounded, echoing through stone corridors that had become a living nightmare. And you know what the truly insane part is? This was still better than what awaited outside. An area of just 30 square kilometers. That's about the size of a small town. And in this tiny pocket of hell, hundreds of thousands of men would die. The French had one supply road out of range of German artillery. One. They called it the Voie Sacrée, the sacred road. Over 3,000 trucks a day brought men, ammunition, and supplies to the front. If one broke down, push it off the road, keep moving, because if that road stopped, Verdun would fall. Pétain ordered something radical. No soldier stays at the front longer than 10 days before rotation. This meant something profound. Nearly every soldier in the French army would go through Verdun. Verdun wasn't just a battle. It became a shared trauma, a collective nightmare that bound the entire French nation. By April, the battlefield had become an incomprehensible maze. Trenches, shell holes, mud, death everywhere. The name Verdun became synonymous with mechanized slaughter. And Falkenhayn faced a terrible choice. He'd committed so many reserves to Verdun that he had almost nothing left for his real attack against the British. The trap he'd designed for France was becoming his trap. He was only left with two options at this point: stop the offensive and defend what they'd gained, or commit everything and keep pushing. Half measures were unacceptable now. He chose the latter. In June, he officially declared bleeding France dry as the main objective, but the world was shifting against him. June 1916. Russian General Brusilov launches a massive offensive in the east. It's a spectacular success. Austria-Hungary, Germany's ally, is on the verge of collapse. German reinforcements meant for Verdun must head east immediately. More bad news. The French now have air superiority. New Nieuport 11 fighters dominate the skies. Time is running out. Falkenhayn launches what he hopes is the final attack. Fort Vaux falls on June 6th, a victory. But Fort Souville still stands between Germany and victory. And Souville, the Germans cannot take it. June 23rd. French General Robert Nivelle gives his famous order, "Vous ne les laisserez pas passer, mes camarades," which is famously known as, "They shall not pass." And they don't. July 1st, the British launched their relief attack at the Somme. German reserves had to be pulled away from Verdun to fight the British. Now, three of the largest battles in human history rage simultaneously: Verdun, the Somme, and the Eastern Front. August 1916, Romania joins the Allies. A new front opens. The Germans have hundreds of thousands of enemies overnight. Falkenhayn loses the confidence of the Kaiser. He loses his job. The architect of Verdun is gone. But the battle isn't over. Now it's France's turn to launch a counteroffensive. Pétain brings in two 40-centimeter railway guns. Each shell weighs nearly a ton. They fire on Fort Douaumont. And finally, after 8 months, the fortress cracks. November, the French retake Douaumont. What took the Germans months of brutal fighting to capture, the French retake in hours. By the end of 1916, the front lines are almost exactly where they were in February. 303 days of battle, 700,000 casualties. Some estimates say a full 1,000,000 for a few kilometers of churned earth for nothing. Veterans would later remember Verdun not by what they saw, but by what they smelled. The mixture of poison gas and decomposing bodies that had lain unburied for months. Mass graves churned up by artillery fire, spilling their contents across the battlefield. Corpses in no man's land were mummified by the elements, their faces frozen in their final expression before death. Soldiers advancing into the forward trenches had to stomp over the corpses and body parts of their dead comrades. There was no other way forward. Only the flies and rats thrived at Verdun in 1916. For many soldiers who survived, Verdun became the epitome of what modern war truly was. Not glory, not honor, not heroes, just mechanized death, industrial-scale slaughter, hell on earth. For a century, historians accepted that Falkenhayn's intention from the very beginning was to bleed France dry at Verdun. After the war, Falkenhayn claims he'd written about this strategy in a Christmas memorandum to the Kaiser in 1915. But here's the thing. The Kaiser never mentioned such a memorandum, and there's no evidence it ever existed. Falkenhayn may have invented the entire bleed them dry strategy after the fact, as an excuse to explain away his catastrophic failure. Which means 700,000 men may have died at Verdun, not for a calculated strategy, not for a brilliant plan, but for one general who refused to admit he'd made a mistake. 303 days, 700,000 casualties, the longest battle of World War I. And France's answer echoes through history. Ils ne passeront pas. They shall not pass.